Now we're talking about the election. She, like many other celebrities after this election, decided to make her personal politics known. She wanted to launch an attack on not only Donald Trump, but his supporters. And she did so publicly on her Instagram story, and today we're going to read the statement and react.
Disney's live-action Snow White was supposed to be a daring remake of a timeless classic, but it swiftly descended into chaos due to outrage against the seven dwarfs being replaced with a diverse band and Rachel Zegler's harsh remarks against Trump fans. Every aspect of this movie seemed to incite indignation as expenses skyrocketed and viewers abandoned it. How did a tale of magic and wonder turn into one of the most inventive periods in Disney's history when the company was forced to scrap the project completely?
Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all?
Zegler's open criticism of the original Snow White, a movie that essentially established Disney's empire, in interviews made it seem as though she wasn't just rejecting the film's themes but also disrespecting a piece of cinematic history. Imagine being given the keys to an iconic role and instead of honoring it, you tear it down. Fans who grew up loving the classic movie were understandably upset. Zegler called the princess a creepy stalker and claimed that women today no longer crave the kind of romance the original story portrayed.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Rather than honoring the beloved fairy tale, the remake became a symbol of Hollywood's overzealous attempt to be politically correct. The divisive casting could have been a progressive move, but it felt forced and disconnected from the story's roots. What Disney seemed to forget was that people watched Snow White for the magic, charm, and the nostalgia quote, not for the social commentary. The backlash was swift, and loud fans took to social media to accuse Disney of pandering and losing touch with its audience.
There are actors, dwarf actors, that dream to be in a major motion picture such as this Disney remake. And now, because Peter Dinklage said what he said last year, now it's taken away.
When Rachel Zegler's remarks about Donald Trump and his supporters went viral, she didn't hold back from calling Trump supporters pathetic disappointments and wishing that they never know peace. For a public figure, especially one who is leading a major Disney project, this kind of statement was like throwing gasoline on an open fire. But Rachel Zegler is more than just an actress. She is someone who isn't afraid to voice her opinions no matter how controversial that outspokenness takes center stage.
And the people who, it seems to me, have really suffered in all this are the six dwarf actors who would have expected to have roles in this remake in a massive Hollywood blockbuster, who are now not going to have that experience, or the money, or the fame that may have come with that.
The timing of the situation was even more complicated because the political atmosphere was already charged with Trump's recent election dominating headlines. Rather than avoiding controversy, Zegler dove headfirst into it, turning the Snow White project into a battlefield for political and cultural arguments. Fans who may have been hesitant about the remake had yet another reason to leave.
Quote, "The left continues to fail us in forging a new path forwards. This loss should not have been, and it certainly should not have been by so many votes. May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace."
Though it wasn't simply what she said, many began to wonder about the bigger picture of accountability. Given that Gina Gano, another Snow White live Disney actress, had been fired for making political remarks that many people deemed less provocative than Zegler's, why was Zegler still cast in a part that angered millions of people? No one was unaware of the double standard, which contributed to the idea that Disney had lost its direction.
Apparently telling Rachel Zegler to behave normally just isn't an option either. So the other day, in response to the presidential election, Zegler had a very public meltdown on her Instagram stories. She wrote, quote, "F you, Donald Trump." And she proceeded to insult the 75 million Americans who voted for him. Quote, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leading us towards a world I do not want to live in."
If Disney regrets anything, it's the amount of money they spent on the Snow White live-action version. This project has seen numerous difficulties, and each time it looked like things could go any worse, they managed to turn what began as a straightforward reworking of a classic into a financial and PR catastrophe.
Why? But look, they've got their reasons, and apparently it's all Donald Trump's fault. Look, the official trailer of Disney's Snow White movie has been released, and it's being slammed as woke. Let's just take a look at the trailer.
The first major problem was the backlash from fans who weren't happy with the casting changes. Disney attempted to address this with a reshoot, But reshoots are never cheap, and in this case, they reportedly cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Fans who saw leaked clips online weren't impressed because the film seemed to focus on a hyper-modernized version of the story that people call the feminist fever dream. It felt like Disney wasn't just reinterpreting the story, they were rewriting it entirely. The release date kept getting pushed back, with the most recent delay pushing the film to 2025. People began to question whether Disney had any idea what it was doing with this movie, because it doesn't exactly exude confidence when a project continues getting delayed. What made it worse was that the criticism had shifted from the concept and casting of the movie to the production itself, with the budget skyrocketing to absurd levels. Fans even joked that the studio would have been better off scrapping the project entirely rather than investing more money in something so divisive, and the ongoing leaks only served to fuel the flames. Fans wanted the magic and nostalgia that made the original a classic, not a contemporary political spin on the tale, and brief snippets and information about the film's new direction gave the impression that the film was so different from the original that it hardly felt like Snow White anymore. In all honesty, Disney's decision to end the live-action Snow White project seemed inevitable. The Snow White project was a sinking ship that couldn't be saved after months of growing criticism, never-ending disputes, and a skyrocketing budget. Although Rachel Zegler's creative public persona was a major factor in this choice, the problems were not limited to a single actress.
Apologise for her comments, but it's certainly not the smartest marketing move ahead of this film.
No, I mean, it's a great strategy putting out your leading actress to go ahead and piss off half of the American population and potentially causing a huge backlash from it.
Fans were incensed about the story's changes, the removal of the Seven Dwarfs, Zegler's contempt for the first movie, and the actress's public remarks, particularly her caustic remarks about Trump supporters, which only served to fuel the flames with such widespread criticism. The backlash against Snow White wasn't just loud, it was unrelenting. Disney found itself in a precarious position. Financially, the project was a disaster. The budget had skyrocketed due to reshoots and delays, with costs reaching the hundreds of millions for a film that was already struggling to generate positive buzz. On top of that, Disney has been dealing with a string of underperforming films, so it couldn't afford another high-profile flop. Shelving Snow White may have been a difficult decision, but it was probably the only one left to make. What made the situation even more frustrating for fans was the obvious double standard. Many drew attention to the fact that Disney swiftly dismissed Gina Gano due to her political beliefs while supporting Zegler for even more divisive remarks. Fans didn't like this discrepancy until the reaction got so bad that the studio ultimately took action. They regarded it as just another instance of Disney putting politics ahead of justice and good storytelling. Disney's Snow White became a cautionary tale. The project wasn't simply a disaster. It represented everything that fans have been complaining about in recent years, from hiring divisive personalities that alienate audiences to emphasizing woke messaging above sticking to popular stories. It was difficult to overlook Disney's errors with this movie, Snow White. Fiasco has damaged Disney's reputation once more, and it's not just about one FFM. It's a part of a larger issue that has been simmering for years. Disney's battle to strike a balance between adhering to the tales that founded its empire and embracing contemporary ideals after decades. People are beginning to question whether the firm still even recognizes who its audience is. The focus has shifted in recent years from producing universally adored tales to promoting messaging that frequently feels more like a lecture than entertainment. Disney was the go-to name for timeless storytelling. People grew up with its characters, songs, and magic. Snow White turned into the ideal illustration of this. The traditional fairy tale was not only updated, rather, it was completely rewritten in a way that offended the same people who loved it. Longtime admirers felt deceived by Disney's preference for political correctness above maintaining the charm that made its story unique, so the criticism wasn't shocking. Audiences don't object to change. They simply want it to make sense. However, when a tale is stripped of its essence in order to appeal to trend, they also begin to lose faith. And this isn't an isolated instance either. Snow White is the latest in a long line of disputes that have eroded Disney's once dominant and untouchable image, from controversial remakes to charges of unfair treatment, such as that of Rachel Zegler versus Gina Carano. The real risk here isn't just losing one project or disappointing a few fans. It's the long-term harm to Disney's brand, which was once known as family-friendly. Disney keeps making headlines for all the wrong reasons, and each mistake drives more fans away, putting the company in a difficult position. The question is whether Disney can find its way back before it loses its magic for good. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. Feel-good entertainment is beginning to feel disconnected from the people who made it successful, when audiences can no longer rely on Disney to deliver the kind of stories they love. Audiences will start looking elsewhere. This isn't the end for Disney. It's too big to collapse overnight, but the Snow White mess should serve as a wake-up call. People don't want divisive politics in their fairy tales. They want to laugh, cry, and escape into a world of wonder, just like they always have.
What would you like to know? Tell me.
Disney's live-action Snow White was supposed to be a daring remake of a timeless classic, but it swiftly descended into chaos due to outrage against the Seven Dwarfs being replaced with a diverse band and Rachel Zegler's harsh remarks against Trump fans. Every aspect of this movie seemed to incite indignation as expenses skyrocketed and viewers abandoned it. How did a tale of magic and wonder turn into one of the most inventive periods in Disney's history when the company was forced to scrap the project completely?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
Zegler's open criticism of the original Snow White, a movie that essentially established Disney's empire, in interviews made it seem as though she wasn't just rejecting the film's themes but also disrespecting a piece of cinematic history. Imagine being given the keys to an iconic role and instead of honoring it, you tear it down. Fans who grew up loving the classic movie were understandably upset. Zegler called the princess a creepy stalker and claimed that women today no longer crave the kind of romance the original story portrayed.
In a classic film to remake it, but you don't seemingly like your own character.
Rather than honoring the beloved fairy tale, the remake became a symbol of Hollywood's overzealous attempt to be politically correct. The divisive casting could have been a progressive move, but it felt forced and disconnected from the story's roots. What Disney seemed to forget was that people watched Snow White for the magic, charm, and the nostalgia quote, not for the social commentary. The backlash was swift, and loud fans took to social media to accuse Disney of pandering and losing touch with its audience.